Okay, hello. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our webinar around the DVW Analytics Tableau Connector for SAP. As you can see, and hopefully you're in the right place, we are here to learn how easy it is to connect your SAP data into Tableau in terms of maybe prep or desktop or even server. We're going to run through how our software enables that simple connectivity, which I'm sure is a challenge or can be a pain to many of our customers. So let's move on. I've got a few slides that I'd like to just talk to you through our software, and then I'll show you some demonstrations. Just a little bit of housekeeping if you like, and if you, as we work through the webinar, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the button there to ask your questions, and my colleagues sitting in the background will happily reply to you and hopefully give you some good answers there. Okay, so let's start from our company, DVW Analytics. We are providers of a software, several pieces of software which connect multiple analytics tools to your SAP data. We've been around for 6-7 years now, and have a large following, as you can see here, or some of our following anyway, in terms of customers around the globe. That's 300 plus organizations all around the world, some of which are shown on the screen here. And obviously not a complete list, but you get the idea that we cover and connect many companies to their SAP data in terms of analytics across all types of verticals, all types of functions within those companies. In terms of how we connect and where we connect, you can see from the slide now that we can connect to very many different types of SAP systems. From the standard ERP, the classic ECC, R3 type solutions, even through to S/4HANA. Also on BW, we can connect to older versions of BW through to the HANA versions, and I'll show you examples of how we can bring data from these systems today live into Tableau, very simply using our connectors. Also, we can connect to other systems on the ABAP stack. So for instance, the Business Suite applications, these are legacy nowadays maybe for many, but there are certainly many of these systems still up and running and working well. So CRM, SRM, etc., etc. And also the industry solutions that we see at the bottom here. So if you run industry solutions, then they're also run on the ABAP stack, and like all the other ABAP stack pieces, we can connect into that data in many different ways, and we can pull that data very efficiently into Tableau. In terms of other SAP products, certainly on the cloud side, the customer experience products we can connect to, so like C4C, Marketing Cloud, and also maybe by design, which is the SME ERP product. We can connect into SuccessFactors, as you can see here, and also the planning products. So the older business of planning and consolidation, and its successor, integrated business planning. So all of these solutions, it's possible to bring data from into your Tableau solutions using our connectors. This is a partial list. It's the big hitters, if you like. So if you don't see a system that you're interested in, firstly, if it's got SAP on the label, then there's a very good chance that we can connect into it. Just get in contact with us, and we can quickly tell you whether it's possible and whether the use case that you're thinking of can be supported. So we have a large breadth of systems that we can connect to, but how we connect into those systems is varied as well. So we have a depth of connectivity. So if we think about how we read into our platform, then there are several different methodologies that we can use. From the most granular, looking at an SAP table at the table level, so akin, if you like, if you know your SAP to the transaction code SE16. You don't need SE16 to run our connectors, but it's like that. So we can pull table data directly out of SAP. We can also run T codes or reports. So that's running a transaction code that you might run in the GUI. So you're used to maybe as a business user running a specific T code. Within GUI, we can run it actually externally and use that data as a feed into Tableau. We can use the spool. This is the old print queue, if you like, in SAP. So if you run a process, a report in background, then it will write to the spool queue and we can pick up data from there. We mentioned the cloud solutions. So their primary connectivity is around web services, OData web services. We can connect into those. We can, on a more technical level, pull data from using BAPIs, SAP BAPIs, which is a standard connectivity solution at a business level. It's worth noting that we can also use BAPIs and indeed other solutions to write back into SAP also. So that's something worth considering. On the BW side, we can use connect into all manner of objects on the BW side. So we can connect into queries, query views, all different types of objects within BW, such as info providers, cubes, multi-providers, DSOs, even info objects. And we can even bring out flattened versions, if you like, of hierarchies so that you can use those in your analytics to combine and consolidate data. Finally, if you're running SAP on HANA, then we can read from any HANA view, so whether it be a CDS view, a calculation view, any type of HANA view can be read. The way our platform works is that it's a piece of software that sits either on your desktop or as a server version, and it's where you, as you'll see shortly, build connections to the specific data that you're interested in extracting, whether it be table views through to HANA views. Once those connections are built, which is a quick and user-friendly process, as hopefully you'll see shortly, we can use those connections and connect into the various flavors of Tableau that are available from Prep, desktop, online, server. All is possible, as you'll see shortly. Some important features of our connectivity. As a paradigm, it's worth noting that we will always connect to the application layer. So technically, we are connecting using RFC connections, very much akin to your SAP GUI connections if you're used to accessing SAP that way. So exactly the same way as SAP GUI connects into SAP, we will connect from our console and ultimately Tableau through into SAP in the same way using those RFC connections. The reason we go via this application layer is at least two or threefold. Firstly, when a user makes a call back into SAP, as per GUI, they need to have a logon. So a username and password, single sign-on is possible, but they need to have that user on the SAP system. That means that as they log on effectively into the SAP system, the application layer will check that they're a bona fide user of that system and apply their authorizations. So the whole SAP authorization model is respected by our connectors. There's no need to create a new parallel universe of authorizations. We use just the SAP authorizations that are already in place. The second side is that we want to make sure, as I'm sure your SAP basis team would want it, that we can't break the SAP system, okay? And this is done by respecting the safety belts that the basis team, your SAP IT team, have put in place in order that you can't bring too much data out in any one call, and you can't tie up a dialog process for too long so as to use too much of the resource from the SAP system. That doesn't mean you can't extract large amounts of data. It just means it protects the SAP system from being overloaded. So all the safety belts, all the authorizations that have been put in place by your SAP team will be respected, and there's no way you can harm in any way or indeed see data that you shouldn't be seeing from SAP. So let's get on to how we connect then. In terms of connectivity, there are basically two streams two ways we can connect in. One is using Python scripting, using the TabPy solution from Tableau. The second is using an OData web services approach. You can see by the solutions that are serviced by these that there's a slight difference. The missing one from each side, which is online on this side and prep on this side. I know that Tableau are looking to enhance for instance, their OData services, and a small tweak on the online side to allow us to use either on there. So this list may become full shortly. But if you're looking for prep, probably the best way is Python. If you're looking for online, say maybe the OData services. But there's lots of flexibility here. You can switch and change using our connectors. Hopefully you can see the difference and the possibilities that arise from using either. So let's start with the OData side. Okay, the way this works is that central to everything here is our console, our TCS console. This is the software I was talking about. So this is our tool that allows the world of SAP to connect to Tableau. The console is where you will build your connectivity, and it's here where you make the calls. An RFC call, as you remember, just like a SAP GUI, back into your SAP systems. I have some of those systems here, but this isn't an exhaustive list, of course. We've talked about the different systems that we can connect to. So we make our connectivity, we make our connections within the console. And what happens next is we can then, from Tableau, make a call to those OData services, to those connections, in order to trigger the pullback from SAP of live data into Tableau. So enough talking, let's see it in action then. So in terms of what we're going to look at first is exactly that. We're going to create a connection. As you can see on the screen, I'm going to create a connection that reads an SAP transaction code, and then I'm going to consume that connection within Tableau Desktop. Okay, so let's flick across to Desktop and go from there. So you'll all be familiar with Tableau Desktop. If we look at our connections, one of them is the OData service here, okay? And it's this connection that we're going to use in order to pull our data from SAP. But as we said, we can't do that unless we build first our connectivity into SAP itself. So we need our console. Our console is just a piece of software. You can see it's an application here that runs on your desktop. As I said, there is a server version. I will talk about that in a little later in the call. So here's our console. You can see that I've already built some connections, some configurations to different tables, to BW, to transaction codes. Let's start afresh and show you how this works as we work through. So I simply create a new connection. And you can see immediately it's got my licensing. Obviously, that's on the DVW Analytics side. It's got the list of tools that I can use. You'll see those that I've mentioned already. listed in here. So I'm going to select the tool I want. I'm going to run a T code. And also we can configure the console to point at our SAP solutions. Now, obviously, I've got lots of demo systems here, should I say, but you get the idea of the type of different SAP solution I can connect to. BW, CRM, HANA. It's a little like, if you like, the SAP logon pad, where you see all your systems lined up, but it's even more, it's enhanced above that because you've got things like maybe success factors in here. Marketing cloud you wouldn't have, of course. So lots of different possible systems in here. I'm going to use my ECC system here. And you can see when I select that my username and password have been retained. They're double encrypted and they're stored locally on my machine here against my particular license ID. Once I've selected this, I can then ping the system and check that all that configuration is all good. The configuration, by the way, is very similar to SAP logon pad, so will be very familiar to SAP people. All is good, it's successful. What I'm going to do is create a connection, as I said, to a transaction code. So let's call it, I don't know, test T code 678. Okay, and we can save that. And what happens is this configuration is saved as a file on my desktop, ready to use. So let's start to parameterize that. So the next tab gives me the opportunity to now pick which transaction code, or indeed report, which you can see here if you know a report that you'd like to run. I'm going to use FBL3N. This is an accounting document line item report. Many of you will be familiar with. It's well used, well known. And if I search, that's going to make a call back to my ECC system in order to check that this is a valid T code, and you can see that it is, and it's found the program that's behind it. When I select that, it's again going to call back to ECC, and it's going to bring back initially, as you can see, all the different variants that are stored against that transaction code. Now, a variant is just a pre-saved set of parameters. So, for instance, let me show you. Let me pick one of these. I'm going to pick this variant here. These were saved, don't forget, on the SAP side. But if I copy, you'll be able to see that it brings across the values in here of company code, GLs, dates. We can even enter layouts into a parameter screen. And this is exactly the parameter screen that you would see within the SAP GUI. You can manually change this if you like. So if you don't want 3000, you can change the company code here. I'm not going to worry. I'm just going to stick with what I've got. But all is possible to maintain here. And I can go across to data preview and get a view of what the data would look like when I run this transaction code, remember using that variant. And this is exactly what it looks like in the SAP GUI. You can see on this particular example, this particular T code, that we have GL account and company code. So we have a combination here of those. And then we get a little mini table of data for the parameters we've asked for. We also get some totals, which is great. And then we get for the next combination, we get another table, and so on and so on and so on. There are lots of these, as you can see. I won't go through them all. Now, that's a typical output within SAP, within the SAP GUI. And as an endpoint, that's okay, let's say. However, in terms of analytics, it's not certainly not immediately usable. And it'd be great to be able to use this data downstream in some analytics. What's great is that the tool can manipulate this data and cleanse this data to make it much more usable. So for instance, if we look here, we've got a header for our table. We can right click and say, look, this is a header row. Okay, so let's make sure we can identify that. We also look at the GL and company code here and think, well, they're sitting outside the data, so it'd be great if we could have them in the table with the rest of the data, and we can do that. So if we right click and we pass the header field, you can see it's starting to collate my configurations. We can also say, look, hey, these totals are of no use to us at the moment. Downstream in Tableau, we can make the consolidations, we can make total values as and when we need them downstream in the analytics. These aren't useful now. So let's try and right click and ignore this row. Okay. Now, no program is perfect. This one has not quite got this right. What it's seen is that there's a pipe at the start of these rows. And so it said where there's a pipe, ignore it. That's good. It would ignore these rows, but it would also ignore these rows because they've got a pipe too. However, the rows that we're interested in have an asterisk. They have an asterisk at 0.4, you can see. So it's easy, it's no problem. We can change this. So we can manually manipulate this to say, look, where you see an asterisk at 0.4, I want you to ignore that row. Let's do another raw preview. Now what you see is exactly the same data, but it's been coded, color-coded, in order that you can understand exactly what this configuration is doing. Here's our header row. We've got our GL and company code. It's going to put those into the table, which is all white, and anything in gray is going to get ignored, including our totals. But it's not only done it for this first table, it's done it wherever it sees that pattern. So you can see every single table has been picked up in the same way. And that's great because now when we confirm the layout, you can see that GL, company code are now in the table. Here's the first combination, the second combination, you can see here, third, etc. We've got nice clean data coming out of those mini tables. There's no additional unusable lines, and all those totals have been removed. So we're in a good place now to save this configuration. And if we skip back to the console, you'll see that our test T code 678 is now available. And here's our connectivity. This is our connection that we can now use downstream in Tableau. So we said we connect by an OData service. How do we get the OData? Well, that's simple enough. If we right click, we can see that we can copy the URL that's specific for our OData calls. Okay. And if we skip back into Tableau, and now we say, okay, I want to connect using that URL. I've just got to put my password in here. Let's try again. So now what's happening is Tableau is now talking to my console, that little piece of software that holds those configurations, and it's bringing back all the configurations ready for me to use within Tableau. Here's the one I created, 678. I just can now bring this across, and straight away we get to see the metadata within that call. Okay, it's exactly the columns we had within the output of the transaction code. That's great. And if we go into our first sheet here, did I get it? I did. You can see that it's actually running that T code now. It's pulled the data through, and we have our values that we can start to populate within Tableau. This is Tableau, of course. So what's great is we can now do, I don't know, let's have a look at this this particular value. You can see it's an amount, but it's being seen as a string. And the reason is because, and you may have seen this if you tried to manipulate data in Excel or in Tableau or wherever it may be, lining up data, especially from SAP, so that the output matches your formatting on the desktop side, on the Windows side, is difficult. You can see why, because we've got dots and commas and minus signs on the right hand side. My configuration expects commas and dots and left hand minuses, so it doesn't like this, but that's no problem. We can pull this out, and we can create a calculated field just as you would, and let's call it Amount, local currency, value. I've got a little bit of code here that I'm going to cheat, of course, but those of you that are used to Tableau are used to the coding and the format. So I'm just basically saying, look, if it's got a minus, put it at the front, and then just change those dots and commas around for me and change it into a numeric. If I say OK, then I get my value here. And if I pull in, we can now start to use it. Here are my GLs. Here's my value, and all is good. And obviously, you can then, you're in the world of Tableau, so we can use those values to create great graphics, etc., etc. What's really good is if we right-click and refresh, then that's refreshing the data from SAP via our console, pulling that T code or running that T code, pulling the data across and refreshing the data in Tableau. So we get up-to-date data from SAP, as simple as that, straight from an SAP T code. Okay, so that was the OData solution. Okay, so that's using that OData call directly into our console in order to pull data from SAP. The second approach is a tweak on the same thing, but it actually gives us a little bit more flexibility. And as you'll see, it enables us to manipulate those calls a little bit more from the front end, from the Tableau end, and also allows us to build some really interesting flows within Tableau Prep. So you can see very similar sort of flow. We build our connectivity exactly the same way using the console back into our SAP systems. When we have our connection, however, the console is able to generate a Tableau Python script. And it's that script that can be used by the TabPy engine to run data into Tableau Prep, for instance. Okay, so it's a really nice flow. As you'll see, it also then lends itself to additional pieces that allow more flexibility at the front end and some great possibilities. So the second demo then, this time in Tableau Prep, we're going to pull data from an SAP table, actually SAP tables, and you'll see what I mean in a second. And we're going to build a flow that will be much more flexible, much more parameterized, and you'll see some of the possibilities, and hopefully it'll trigger a few light bulbs in your head. So let's go across to Prep then. If I can find where I'm going. Oh, there it is. Can't see the right button. There we go. Okay, so again, we're going to connect to data. And we will connect and build that data into Tableau Prep. But first, of course, we can't do that until we've connected and created a connection within the console. So we create a connection. Again, similar window, it's exactly the same, but we're going to change it this time and say, look, I'm not going to use a T code this time. I'm going to use some table data. Again, from my ECC system. I don't need to ping this time. I know it's going to work because I did it before. So let's call this, I'm going to use the accounting header table. So BKPF, and let's call that 678. Again, I'm going to save the file back as an initial file, but now I'm going to add those parameters in here. This time the parameter looks slightly different. Obviously, it's a table rather than a T code. But if I search for my table, I can look back into the ECC system, search for BKPF, and I'll get a list of tables within SAP that have BKPF on them. So you can see that's within the technical name or indeed within the description. Here's the one I want, it's BKPF, the accounting document header table. I say OK, And now a call is made back into ECC, into SAP, to bring back the metadata for that table. And you can see quickly that we have that metadata shown here. Now, simply we pick the fields that we're interested in. So these are the fields. I'm just going to pick a few of these, doesn't matter too much. Okay, as my output. These are going to be my output into Tableau eventually. One thing worth noting, one nice feature is that we can click on here and see the keys for those if we prefer the technical names for the fields. Okay, so the columns in that table. Obviously, we can look at these and pick data out, but what's even more crucial is that we can right-click here and we can add a blank filter. We can filter actually on any field within the table. So we can pick fiscal year, and we just hit a value in here, and we can simply type if we like. That's one possibility. Or maybe if we're not sure which values we want, we can add a blank filter and maybe edit that filter. Let's search for some values. Let's start with K maybe. And we can see then all the document types that are available in that format. So that's made a call back to ECC and brought back those document types. And we can pick a single one of these if we like. We have the usual sort of include, exclude, and the usual operators, greater than, less than, even in list. Yep, so we could say, look, pick things from in this list, and we can pick all 6 of those or whichever ones we want. So we can be very specific. We can even make a split call. And this is interesting because what it enables us to do is instead of making one large call back to the SAP system, we can break down that call into several chunks. In this case, it would be 6 separate chunks, one for each document type. Equally, it could be one for each company code or whatever filter we're looking at. Okay, now that's great because it allows us then to keep below the radar, if you like, on the SAP side. Remember, I mentioned those safety belts in the application server, the ones that the basis team set. If you want large amounts of data, then, and when I say large, I mean tens of millions of lines, as some of our customers are already extracting from SAP, then it makes sense to break those calls up, to split them into many smaller chunks. Okay, I'm not going to bring that filter through, but hopefully you get the idea of how that works. In fact, I'm going to just delete that filter there. And as you see, this is very usable. I'm just going to stick to a filter, but we can be as prescriptive in our filters as we wish. I'm going to do a data preview here so I can get an idea of the type of data that comes out. You can see, look, exactly the columns that I've selected, some good data coming out. It's all going to be 2019, of course, because it's filtered. And of course, if we applied any other filters, they would be seen here. Okay, if we're happy with that, then again, we can save that configuration, save that connection. And indeed, when we come back here, you can see that this BKPF 678 has been generated. Now that's the connectivity. The next step, if you recall, is that we need a script. We're going to run a script, a Python script within TabPy. Now don't worry, you don't need to have to be able to script in order to use this. All we need to do is skip to the next button, the next tab here to script. And what we can do is we can say, look, for my BKPF 678 connection, I want to run a Tableau script, okay? And automatically it's going to generate that script for me to use. Okay, so automatically that script has been created, and what's more, we can be even cleverer. So what we can do is in this tab here, add some filters. So for instance, maybe in Tableau, I'd like to filter on company code. I can add that filter into my script. Also, I might want to filter on year. I'm just going to put number 1 there rather than number 2. So on year, fiscal year. All I need to do is refresh my script, and you can see now that it's added those 2 inputs, those 2 filters that can be called from the Tableau side. So we can build in intelligence, build in the dynamic nature of this call and allow it to be controlled further upstream. If we're happy with this, then we just save it. Okay. And when we go back into file management now, if we just look at the Python scripts that we've saved, we can see here's my 678 script here. Okay. And indeed, if we go to file, within here, you can, where is it? There it is. There's the actual physical file that does the work. So you can even share these. The rest of my configurations are in here. So you can share them with your colleagues, etc. Okay. So let's get into Tableau and use this script. Here's the exciting bit, hopefully. So I'm going to jump across to Prep and build a flow. Now the idea is to make this as dynamic as possible. So what I'm going to start with actually is a text file. Okay, and the text file, as you'll see, as I bring it in, just a second, has some values in it. For some reason, it wants to make them numbers, which is perfectly okay, but I want to make them strings. You can see what they are. There's company code and fiscal year. No coincidence. Those are the 2 values or the 2 columns I set up as filters in my script. So I've got a particular company code, a series of years, and I'm hopefully going to pass those into my script. If I add this now to a script, I can say it's a tab.py script. I can look for my script that I've just generated. Here it is. And now I just need to tell Prep to get data. That's the function within the script that does the work. So I've got my filter here. I've passed it into my script, and that script has called my connection back into SAP and pulled the table data, as you can see, into tab.py and into Prep indeed. Okay, but that's not all. So you can see how dynamic that can be. Yeah, that's fantastically dynamic, but that's not all. Look what we can do. So this is the header table. That's BKPF. We can also add new steps. So I'm going to add another script. And what would be really nice is if I didn't get just the header data, I got the line item data, the segment data that relates to it. So I can use another script, which I built earlier. And if I take a look in here, just bear with me, we can pick up my bseg script, very similar, created in exactly the same way. And what I'm doing now is I'm going to go get that data. But the data I'm getting depends on the data that this script, this Tableau output, is supplying it. So I'm only bringing through the bseg data that is specific, i.e. the line items that are specific to the headers that I'm interested in. So you can see immediately we're getting very specific data from the line items. Now all we need to do is join those 2 pieces of data together. So use a quick table join. The join needs to be on the key, so counting document, company code, and we'll get a good output then on this side. Just run the output, and you can see now that I'm getting header data that is very specific according to my filter here. You can see it'll be, if you remember, company code 1000 in certain years. Okay, and you can see those years reflected here. but also we're getting the line items, and here they are on the right-hand side that are connected to those header data. What's more, hey, we're in Tableau now, okay? So for instance, we can add maybe try again. Click happy there. Add a clean step, okay? So obviously that's picking up the data from here, 1000 and the various years. Maybe I don't want 1000. Maybe I want 3000. I can overwrite that here. Yeah. Maybe I just want 2019. So my filter is reduced. So I'm just going to keep those values. Okay. It could be, and I'm just going to run this now. And while that's running, just talk to this. It could be that I want to calculate today's date. I could use a calculation to calculate today's date, input that in to my flow, into my parameter, and only bring back then from SAP the data from today or yesterday or last month, whatever it may be. It becomes very, very dynamic then. And we can really control our flow from within Tableau. And indeed, when I run it tomorrow, I'll get the data I'm interested in for tomorrow. Okay. But now I've run this, if I look at my output, then you'll see just when that pulls that from in my machine there, that the data now is not what it was before, 1000, company code 1000, it's company code 3000, 2019. So very dynamically, I'm calling exactly the data I want without having to configure even within the console. So hopefully that sparked a few ideas, some light bulbs in your head to see how you could use SAP within Tableau. Just like to show you a few more slides before we close. Just to talk about server. So what we've seen so far has been on the desktop, but it's perfectly straightforward and indeed very, very similar to run the same sort of flows to server. So for instance, if we look at the OData path, if you like, then we can build on desktop our connections. And if we skip into our console, then I'm just going to bring the configuration back here. Then it's easy to publish these, my 678 maybe, across to my remote server. So this is my server version of the console. And indeed, I can see those just by flicking this little switch here across to remote. And there it is, 678 sitting on the server. And that obviously is then available externally, maybe to be pulled from Tableau server or Tableau online, or maybe used directly by other users within the organization. So we can then publish these up. We can use those connectivities either directly or publish them into a server level or online level. And then, of course, we can use those and publish those or consume those within desktop and prep. So you get the full flow on the server side using OData. Equally, we can use TabPy, generate those scripts, have them published into the console and then consumed by a TabPy server maybe. That again could be used directly into prep as we've done today, or we could publish those scripts into online and server so that they can be consumed by general users elsewhere. So to close out, just like to show you just one more demo. And as you can read, it's just to show you what BW looks like on Tableau. It's very quick demo. I've built it already, so I'm not going to build out again the connection. If I just switch back to my local connection, then you can see here's the connection I created earlier. This is for a query within BW. You can see in this I'm using the BW read tool with a BW system this time. I look at my parameters and I'm using a query here Although if I search, you can see that within the possible objects that I can connect to, there are views. They could be older or indeed the newer views. We can search for queries, even different manner of info providers. And indeed, if I search, I can not just get the history, and indeed, yeah, BW people will be used to this view, sort of history and favorites. These are your BW history and favorites, by the way. I can search, and I can connect to all manner of things, such as DSOs, as you can see here, but also info objects, etc., etc. Okay, I'm just going to cancel out of that. Once we've selected an object, this is a query in this case, I can then see the metadata of that query. The ones selected already are the ones that have been defaulted into the query by the person who created that query, but there's no reason I can't turn off or on different values here. I can use attributes within BW. So as you can see here, partner number is there, but maybe I want an attribute, some master data about partner, so the partner type. I can bring in text, as you can see here. So I can also bring, rather than just the number of the partner, I can bring the text behind that. So lots of possibilities here. We can even extract hierarchies. So as we mentioned, we can pull out a BW hierarchy so that we can then use it downstream in Tableau to connect and consolidate our data there. Any variables and filters, if there are mandatory variables, can be seen on the screen here. You can see they're in green because I filled them. At first they're red to say, look, hey, these are mandatory. But equally, we can add more filters if we wish. So if we want to add a filter on partner number, we can do that. Okay, so we can add as many filters as we wish. We can then get a data preview of what the query looks like, checking that the output that we get is as we wish. And hopefully it's going to come any second now. There you go. So exactly the columns, the fields, the characteristics, if you like, that I've been looking for, displayed how I want. I can save that then and then use it in the same way, either by using the OData route, or in this case, as you can see, I've used the tab.py route. I've got the right place. So here's my BW query. Okay, notice, by the way, that I can run multiple different tools within the same prep flow, as it were, combine those data obviously downstream. That's perfectly okay. But within BW, you can see that I've pulled in my my data from my Python script, and here is my query data that you've just seen in the preview in Tableau Prep. And obviously then we've got all the great functionality of Tableau to use downstream. Okay, so that's all I've got for you today. Hopefully it's piqued your interest. If it has, then please visit us on our website at dvwanalytics.com. There you can contact us, you can ask us questions. My name's Ian James, and you can contact me from via the website. But also you can sign up for a free trial, a free 30-day trial, no obligation at all, to try it out, just to see how easy it is to connect to your SAP data. Thanks again for joining us today. Hopefully you've learned how good it is to get your SAP data on hand in Tableau, and hopefully we'll talk soon to see exactly the use case.